Hey guys, welcome to Real Talk with Ellison, and I am Ellison. Listen, if you are on Facebook, please go ahead and hit the like button. If you are on YouTube, please go ahead and make sure you subscribe and don't forget to click the bell. This way, you know when Real Talk with Ellison is going live. Real Talk with Ellison is a show that focuses on feeling, dealing, and healing the church, and the community as a whole. And with that being said, we're about to get this show started. Hey guys, welcome to Real Talk with Ellison, and I'm Ellison. Listen, all month long we have been talking about the blueprint of a father because fathers are important to a child. Fathers are important to family. Fathers are important to society. Well, on today's show, we're going to go ahead and continue, but I have a special guest as we discuss overcoming the father's wound. My special guest, my friend, my colleague, none other than Don Sinkfield. Hey, Don.
Hi, Ellison.
Hi,
Um,
y'all know
um,
I'm so extra, and y'all be so quiet, so I feel like I gotta be like, hey.
Listen, I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy that you're discussing this very relevant topic. I'm in New York. In New York this past weekend, it was Father's Day weekend. I was invited to three events to commemorate Father's Day, and I was appreciative of the just making this topic relevant as I'm
Mhm.
appreciative of you doing it on this show.
Yes, yes, yes. And before we even get into that, tell us about a little bit about yourself and what it is you do.
So I am an educator by first profession. Worked as a teacher assistant, then a social studies teacher, then a high school guidance counselor, and New York was one of the states that was late on the licensed counselor. Most states have LPCs, licensed professional
Mhm.
counselors. New York was late to have the LPC, and New York didn't get it until 2005. I was one of the first 3,000 licensed counselors in New York, and I've
Okay.
had a private practice called Help to Adjust Inc., which merged into another practice called the New Hope Mental Health Counseling Services. And
Mhm.
so both of those practices um, hey, still exist. And, those practices actually, actively see people. Between both of us, we probably see like 700 people a week.
Whoa. Well, thank you for all you do. 700 people a week. That is phenomenal, right? So, listen, y'all heard me say my friend, right? I've known Don for years, right? So, yeah, he definitely is a friend. Don has given me some business advice. Don was one of the ones that was like, "Ellison, go ahead. You can do your own private practice." So, Don, I appreciate you and all that you do and all the help that you give me and you being here and as a father. Happy belated Father's Day to you. Right? It's Real Talk
Thank
with Ellison. We know you got kids, I got dogs. I mean, hey.
you.
It happens sometime, right? So happy belated Father's Day to you. And I want to jump on Father's Day really quickly. I see a lot of memes and I seen some posts saying, "Oh, happy Father's Day. Now let's get ready to cook our food." Or Father's Day is not as important as Mother's Day. The lines are wrapped around for Mother's Day, but for Father's Day, you can get in any restaurant you want. So let's talk about Father's Day versus Mother's Day a moment here.
Well, there's statistics that I don't have on hand that speak to the scarcity of households that are intact, meaning that that typical nuclear family with mother and father as head of the household.
Mhm.
Um, with Black men
Mm.
in particular, there's a one in three Black men are under the tutelage of the criminal justice system. So that is incarcerated. Um, that is, on probation, parole, or some kind of supervision. And so, as you can imagine, the unemployment, underemployment, and incarceration, criminal justice issues snatch a lot of our men out of the community.
Mm.
So, you have, mothers leading households.
Yeah.
At a high level in terms of the numbers. And because of that, Father's Day is a kind of a time when there's a lot of resentment, frankly,
Yeah.
about
Ooh.
men who, especially these days of social media, men may put pictures of their son or daughter on
Right.
social media and say that, this is my heart, my dream, my son. And then meanwhile, you have a mother who is doing the lion's share of
Right.
the raising of that
Yeah.
child. So
Yeah. I
there's
think
a
that's
there's a
important.
big rift there.
Yeah. I think that's important that you say that because so many times women, because of all the reasons you stated, women have to be the heads of their household. But what I feel like society don't understand is how crucial a father is, right? We're talking about the household, but the household is also a part of the community and a part of society, right? So a father is important to the family dynamic in the home, out of the home. Even if he's out of the home and the mom didn't work out, you can still be a part, right? So the vital role a father plays in their child's life contributes to what? Their emotional, uh, social, cognitive, physical well-being. It contributes to a lot to do with a child. So my first question to you is this: we know when a child is born that the mother gets maternity leave, right? That maternity leave is when the bonding happens. Most of the time, the fathers don't get maternity leave. So they're not getting that bonding, which helps the baby grow and learn and connect and all this stuff. They're not getting that. Do you feel that the lack of bonding plays a role in some of the father child relationships?
Um, Well, absolutely. Paternity leave in New York for men is the law is 5 days. That's what
Wow.
men get, and so as you could imagine, I mean, your child has barely opened his eyes, in
Right.
day five, right? So yes, that I think the progressiveness of the laws are something that leaves a lot to be desired. But if you take it back to for the psychology folks and for those who don't know, Psych 101, trust versus mistrust is the first psychosocial stage of life. It's
Yeah.
where a child learns that the world is a safe place to be in because the needs that the child has are met by parents
Mhm.
or whoever the caretaker is when the child reacts by crying or by making whatever utterances, or they get
Right.
answers, and getting answers in the form of food or being changed or being hugged. That is the first time that the child starts to not only bond but begin to trust that the world is a safe place. And later, that trust forms the human personality.
Mhm.
And so we can get deeper into it, about what happens when a child is not, bonded with early
Yeah.
on, and being bonded with by mom, which is beautiful and important. um, there is a lot of question as to when a child doesn't have their father, what
Right.
what really happens there.
Yeah.
And it's, generally it's not good.
Yeah.
It can be supplemented, but it's not good.
It's not good. So you said by law in New York it's 5 days. Eric says in December of 2022, the military authorized 12 weeks of maternity leave for both men and women.
Well,
So
yay
that
for the
is
military. Yeah.
right, because somebody is noticing that we're not allowing this father, right? He said both men and women, but we are talking about the father, that this father is not being able to bond. And the sad thing is I can't remember where it is in the scripture, but it used to be the man would have to stay home for a year to like minister to his wife and stuff like that because the power of bonding, right? So fast forward, how much more important is that with a father? Because where do I learn? You said trust. So trust comes, I feel safe. Right?
Hmm.
Where do I learn all that from if I'm not connected to my father? And then, you have some, and since we talked about the military, some are born and they're like 6 months by the time their father comes home, or they're just coming home and the father has to leave. So that disconnect right there can play a vital role in a child's upbringing, correct?
Correct. I mean, it's important to note that if a child has a mother, in our communities by tradition, a grandmother, and people around who are meeting the child's needs, the child feels safe, feels loved. For the most part, that child will be okay.
Mhm.
Part of a major part of the problem is that dad is somewhere to be either seen or to be heard about. And
Mm.
the child is getting the idea that the father has made a decision to steer clear for some reason. And, those reasons are complex, of course. There's financial reasons, there's conflict with the other parent.
Yeah.
There's all types of reasons, but um, egocentricity is the term.
Egocentricity.
Yeah, that's the term that's used for a child's thinking, and that is that the child believes, not necessarily consciously, but the
Right.
child instinctively believes that anything that does or doesn't happen for them and to them is somehow a result of what they have done or not done, whether they're okay or not okay, whether they're good enough or not good enough. So you
Ooh.
can have a 5-year old believing that they are, it must have been that I cried too much, it must have been that I wasn't satisfactory in some way, and daddy's not here for that reason. And as you could imagine, it's extremely damaging to the personality and the
Yeah.
development of that child.
Wow. So I think that is so powerful because that's where um self-esteem, self-worth, self-confidence, rejection, neglect, all of that comes from because it's like, okay, well, what was it about me that, I not enough to keep dad around? What did I do? Was I bad or something like that? So you take that, right? And you say, man, if I wasn't this for my dad, then who am I worth to what am I worth to anybody? So how does
Yes.
that now impact me as a teen and as an adult?
That's exactly right. It affects the thinking that the child has about their value in the world. Those questions like who am I, what am I worth, or how important am I to anyone, to the world that I'm in, to my school environment. Um, you know, grandma loves me, mommy loves me. In the best case scenarios, there's a healthy and vibrant love between those other figures. But um, it's a typically like the conversation about adopted children wanting to know who their parents are.
Right.
It's the same kind of thing that happens when dad is not around. Why is my dad not around? Where is my dad? What does it all mean that he's not around? And of course, the research shows that um, there's consequences that children with absent fathers suffer, and in terms of mental health, the um, the depression is just the
Yeah.
thing that comes up over and over. The consensus is that depression is connected definitively to absentee fathers,
Fathers, yeah.
and in terms of behavior, it's perhaps aggression, um, defiance, in some cases withdrawal. I mean, it's interesting because we all have a personality that starts to form based on who we are chemically, and what's called inborn temperament. Right, so
Yeah.
there's we're all different, um, not so different, but we are all
Yeah.
different. And so one child may withdraw, another child may become more aggressive, and yet another child may do passive aggressive type of
Right.
defiance that people will say like, what's wrong, or
What's
why does
wrong with
this,
this?
yeah, why does this happen? But
So
these are
let
all.
me ask you this. Does that go could that go with, for instance, if grandma and grandpa are now raising you, and you're appreciative because they took me in, they love me, they did all this stuff, but the child is still acting up, right? Because dad is not here. But dad didn't want me, right? So can that also be looked at as, well, the child is ungrateful or rebellion, but they simply are just acting out because they're longing for this relationship with their fathers?
So every that egocentricity that I talked about, I mean, it's really something that extends to adults in some cases. I mean, the more emotionally sophisticated we are, the less likely we are to be egocentric. But I mean, the answer to your question is that I think that um, that mom or that grandma or whoever is in the house, even uncles, if
Yeah.
for some reason, if dad is, let's say, incarcerated, and these people are loving presences to this child, they may feel exactly what you said, like,
Mhm.
boy, you get the sneakers you want. You got food on this table. Why are you, you know,
Right.
what you mad about? You all right?
Yeah.
And absolutely, there can be something missing for that child,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
there is no if there's no answer to a question, it's as if something um it's as if you had like a bunch of items that you were moving into your new house, and you know you there was seven handbags, and the biggest and best handbag that you had was missing. I mean, you'd have what you need to make it, like,
Yeah.
because you have still a selection of bags, but the question would be, where is my favorite handbag?
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's kind of
Yeah.
what children go through. Like, I know that my mom loves me. I know that I have sneakers. I know that I'm all good. But why does my father? Why is he
That's
not
good.
here? Yeah.
That's good. I want to talk to this comment. It says, young boys want to make their dads proud. If unable to do that, they can constantly try to do things to feel accepted. And in our world, I'm sure you can attest to this. Do regardless of the age, if I kept striving to make my dad proud and it never was good enough, or dad was absent, am I searching for who I am?
Are you searching for who you are?
Yeah, because where was dad to teach me how to do this? Where was dad to teach me how to be the man? Where was dad to teach me, especially the ones that don't have a grandpa, uncles, or, a village? Where was dad to teach me all of this ways? Because as good as a job that mothers can do, they cannot teach you to be a man, right?
Yeah.
So, is there a constant void missing of who am I? And talk to that.
Yeah, I think that you know where you come from is a part of your identity. I mean,
Mhm.
if you meet somebody and they had their mother and their father in their life, usually if they're really talking about themselves within the first 4 or 5 minutes of talking to a person, they'll say, well, my mom was a school teacher and my dad was a cop, and so what I learned from that was.
Mhm.
And so absolutely, I do believe that when um, a father is not there, besides, so I guess you could distinguish that from the emotional piece, which
Mhm.
is, why am I not loved?
Mm.
What did I not learn? um, who who was who is my father? Who was my father? What would I be if my father was around? I've known many cases of
Mm.
youngsters who, like, they know that their father was a rugged guy who knew how to play ball. Or I shouldn't be using past tense. They know that their father is a basketball guy. They know that their father is a respected person in the community, as far as being tough. And you will hear youngsters sometimes say, if my father would have been around, I really feel I would have been different,
Mm.
but I didn't have whatever discipline. I never really learned how to play ball from him, or whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's good because so many people are looking, or so many young men are looking to belong to something because I wasn't enough for dad to be here, or I wasn't enough for dad to stay around. And then there's the conflict. Let's talk about that because you mentioned that a little bit. And then there's the conflict with the woman, right? Whether it be the wife, the ex-wife, or whatever, whatever. Then there's that conflict. And sometimes men, they don't want to deal with the woman's drama, so they stay away, right? Or sometimes the woman could be scorned and they tend to keep the father away. If the father is a good father, the father's doing what he's supposed to be doing, what kind of impact is it if us women tend to keep the children away from the fathers, or even talk about, I can't stand it. Oh, go on and act your no good father. Stuff like that. What impact are we doing to that child?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a natural. I believe that it's a instinctively natural thing for children to, first, they want their mother and father together. Short of being able to have that, they want to have the love of their mother and father. Short of that, then they at least want to know that they're, the person who's not there, in this case many times as fathers, they want to know that this person is um, thinking about them, the person cares about them, has a holds them in positive regard, and just
Right.
they want to make them proud, etc. So if the father is being diminished in the
Mm.
eyes of, the child is watching this happen. My father is being undervalued. He don't do nothing. He's, some kind of deadbeat, or even in some cases, your father don't love you. If he loved you, he would do this or he would do that for you. It's I really believe it's nothing short of emotional abuse,
Mm.
talk about a parent that is
Yes,
not
that's good.
as present, because if you really think about it, the issues with the parent that's full time, those issues are between adults, and
Yes.
the child is
Caught in
really
the middle.
being burdened with something that's not theirs to be burdened with, because
That's good.
the obvious that is true is that when that boy or that girl comes of age and they're 12, 13, maybe before that, because kids are perceptive, they will know and understand if their father didn't do right or didn't do
Right.
enough.
Let them figure out the relationship, right? We don't, as a mother, we don't have to tell them like your father don't do this or your father don't do that. Let them grow up to see what it is, right?
They'll see
The
it.
best thing you can do is just love the child and let them form an opinion of their own relationship. So I want to address this comment. It says, unfortunately, when the father is absent, it gives a child the opportunity to use that as an cannot be successful or achieve more, and it gets carried into adulthood. So do you feel like it's an excuse that in this, because we're talking about, it happens with women too, but we're talking about, boys and their fathers. So do you feel like, in your opinion, because none of these are facts, we're not saying that this is, but in your opinion, do you feel like it's used as an excuse sometimes?
So you go back again to Erickson's psychosocial stages, right?
Yeah, I knew you. How did I know
Like,
you was going to Erickson?
yeah, so the ages 12 to 19 years old, approximately. I mean, some say 13 to 20, or
Mhm.
but around then, that's the phase of identity versus role confusion.
Yep.
A child or an adolescent during that time should learn whether um, they love math and science and computers more than they love uh, writing and social studies. If they're a more abstract thinker or a more um, concrete thinker. Additionally, who do I like? What kind of girls do I like? What kind of boys do I like? Who am I? And so, in the way of figuring out your identity during that time, if you are feeling depression, adolescent depression coming on,
Yeah.
if you are underachieving in school for any reason, including that depression being a part of it, or um, you you then are going to ask yourself, what do I want to do? Am I going to try harder, or am I going to fall in with the wrong crowd?
Mhm.
And if you do fall in with the wrong crowd, let's say you start drinking, you start experiencing, experimenting with the vaping, getting high, then certainly at that point that you are not being your best self,
Mhm.
you could then look at what has happened to the relationship with your father and make that part of your narrative. I don't. If it's a chicken and egg question, like, well, which comes first? The child getting the child going off track, or is it the loss of the father, of the parental relationship with the father? I would say it's hard to distinguish it, because it can be that children experience a bunch of symptoms from
Mhm.
not having a father, and those symptoms can then lead to the underachievement. And then when the child has a self concept, they're looking at their self concept and they're saying, "Man, I'm just not like, um, my peer at school.
Mhm.
I'm, not my father's not in my life. They may feel inferior because of that." And so, yes, it all figures in.
Yeah. I mean, I like the analogy of the chicken and the egg, like what really comes first, right? I feel my opinion on the matter is I do think sometimes people can use it as an excuse to not do it, right? Because if you want it, can't you chase it? Right? And I mean, I'm
Yeah.
only thinking from my perspective, right? Well, I mean, Don, you knew me forever. Y'all know my dad was crazy. He used to come flying around the corner with the anyway, so I mean, but but I want it different. I wanted to do different. So, when do we develop that mentality? And I'm assuming environment probably plays a big role on that too, and your willpower to do better. So now if I'm a boy and my dad wasn't around, what is that how is that teaching me to be how is that teaching me to be a man in my relationship and a father? Like doesn't that it keeps going, don't it? Doesn't impact now my new family dynamic?
Yeah, well, interestingly, and I'm talking from experience more than studies right now. I was a guidance counselor for a number of years, and what I saw was that kids who didn't have fathers, in some cases, had a kind of reaction formation where they would do the opposite of what the trauma that they experienced with not having their dad there. So,
Mhm.
um, these would be some of the kids who wanted their friend group to be very tight. They spoke about, by the time they were 15, 16 years old, they spoke about wanting to be a real dad when they grow up. And um, I've also counseled adults who they didn't have their father. And when they talk about their own children, it takes on a sacredness unlike anything you've seen. Like it's almost like I have to be this father
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
I didn't have. So there is the possibility that and that's kind of like why I was saying that when a person goes off track, they often use the fact that my dad wasn't there as possibly an
Mhm.
explanation for
Right,
going
right,
off
right.
track, or some might say an excuse. But many people who didn't have their father, men, are very conscientious to do the opposite. And I actually think that's one of the biggest driving forces of what makes for good fathers.
Okay.
People who realize that there was deficits in fatherhood. Let me just really quickly, I'm gonna say that my own father was a wonderful provider, and you know, even when I was out of the house, got me through college. He was living in Florida. I was in New York. He would send little bits of money to try to help me with tuition and
Mhm.
expenses, apartment, etc. And but he, when I was a young person, he really didn't know how to talk to me about the influences with like he was witnessing homosexuality
Mhm.
happening. And my father's an old black man from the South,
Yes.
so at that time he's looking at that like I hope to God you ain't doing that. But it was hard for him to really talk about it openly and freely with me.
Yes,
And
yes.
so, for instance, I would take that maybe deficit that my dad had, not being able to talk about certain things openly, and I would make sure with my kids. I have a 13-year-old boy and a 17-year-old girl. They we talk about those topics not only openly but intentionally. We
Right.
discuss
That's good.
um, everything from topics of sex to peer pressure to social issues.
Yeah. How important is it for, speaking of your 13-year-old son, how important is it for a father to make sure he has these conversations with their sons and they're not learning it the wrong way in the streets, right? Because the impact of a father or the role of a father is different than that of a mother, right? So the conversations look a little different too.
Yeah,
So speak to that. Like, fathers need to have these conversations with their sons, right? And daughters too, but we're talking about sons right now.
yeah. I think that when you have the right relationship with your child, you are picking them up from school. You are hearing, like, sometimes I'll joke around about, like, let me hear the drama, that's happening in school, because there's always a little something happening. Seventh graders are being couples
Mhm.
with, coupling with each other.
Yes.
Seventh graders are getting into fights because of coupling. And so, you know, um, those conversations come naturally. You won't even have to say today, sit your butt down so we could talk about this topic or that. The conversations will come if you have that relationship with your child, because your child will come to you talking about a variety of material that he got live from whatever school
Right.
they're attending. And I'm talking about second grade, third grade. By that time, there's a lot of material that they will
Oh
be
God, you
exposed
don't
to.
even understand. So
Yeah,
the relationship that you're talking about don't just start when they're a teenager. You have to develop, right? A father has to develop a relationship with the son. And I want to speak to that a little bit because most fathers are teaching their sons, how to cut the grass, to work on a car, to build things, right? But it's not many conversations being had. So how important is it to start communicating important conversations with your child age appropriately?
yeah. Well, it's very important because it's, as a counselor, right? As a clinician, you never want the person that you're helping to feel like they need to protect Ellison, right? Like, so for
Mhm.
instance, if a person is feeling suicidal, um, you, Ellison, want to say the word suicide, because if you can't say it because it's just so forbidden, then the person that you're talking to is going to be like, she's scared of this. I don't want to, upset my counselor. She may admire you. The person may admire you very much. And it's the same kind of relationship with children. If children know that you are willing and able to take on any topic, they are likelier to come to you and say, um, this is what's on my mind, or this is what happened to me. If you are,
Approachable.
right, if you too,
So do you do the birds and the bees, Don, or do you say, okay, let us have this talk about sex? Like, do we do the birds and the bees? Because they talked about the birds and the bees with us, and I ain't never seen a bird and a bee get together. But so
right.
how age appropriately do we need to have these conversations with these kids and not sugarcoat it?
Yeah, I don't think there's any science to it about, like, exactly, do you do it at 11.8 years old, or 12.5 years. But I do think that you know their environment is going to give when it needs to be dealt
Mhm.
with, because
Mhm.
they're going to be around kids who are sexually involved. They're going to be
Right.
around kids who are vaping, and my own children, they were acting like totally disgusted by some of this stuff, which of course, I guess I'm appreciative, that they were repulsed by some of the stuff. But the reality is that it's not going to be repulsive to every kid. They're going to have questions about it.
Right.
And I think, like you inferred, if you don't uh, speak to it or answer the questions, they are going to get the information by
From
by trial and
somebody.
fire. Yeah, they're
Right.
gonna they're gonna try to vape. They're gonna sexually experiment,
Yeah.
and one action can change your life
Yeah.
so
Most
much.
definitely.
Yeah.
Especially now. So I want to move on to now as a son, right? Now as a son, I'm older. Um Dad, he hasn't been around, but now dad's starting to come around. So whether it's a teenager, whether, adolescent, whether it's a young adult, or whether it's a good grown man, maybe in my late 20s, early 30s. So I've been wanting dad to come around all of this time, and now dad starts to show up. And I have this inner conflict because the little boy in me really wants dad, but the
Mhm.
now adult in me is like, well, where you been all this time, dude? I don't need you now. Right? So how could we help somebody overcome that inner conflict? Because I really do want this relationship, but I can't let go that you wasn't there all this time.
Right. There's experiments about attachment styles
Mhm.
that are pretty famous experiments, and one of the experiments demonstrates that children who are um, left or abandoned for some short amount of time, but it's like an unsafe kind of abandoning because the child really is questioning, where is my mom,
Mhm.
and then
Mhm.
most of the experiments were done with women, but
Mhm.
I'm just saying this to demonstrate attachment styles. There's some children who, if they feel abandoned, um, they get very angry and they withdraw, and it may take them like 2 minutes for them to warm up and then say, maybe cry on mommy and say, where were you, or like that. Then there's other children who um, they will just immediately run to mommy and cling. And
Mhm.
then there's yet other children who have it may be very difficult for them to re-engage mom after
Mhm.
feeling abandoned,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So similarly, when an adolescent, let's say, has been without his father, and then dad tries to walk back in when he's 15 or 16 years old, there's a difference in reactions based on the personality of that child. And in some cases, that adolescent may have a very conflicted point of view on
Mhm.
dad, and wonder still that essential question that I mentioned before: why wasn't I loved? Why weren't you
Mm.
there? And then may ask himself then, should I even trust this? Am I putting myself in a position to experience more hurt? um,
Ooh, that's
I
good.
just worked with a child at a high school here in New York who actually is graduating high school, and she told me that her dad is a person that simply she doesn't think he's capable of really being consistent and
Mm.
present. And
Yeah.
so in some cases she has opted out of being with her dad because the fear is that there's going to be more hurt, right? It's the old analogy about touching a stove. Like, you touch a
Yeah.
stove and you learn that it hurts. It's the best way to learn not to touch
Right.
a stove without advisement on if it's hot or not. And so, it's really, unfortunately, I mean, it's legitimate in some cases that kids are careful.
Yeah.
Now, in the case that dad was absent for some legitimate reason and is now back, it could still be that that child
That's right.
feels scared to really engage
Yeah.
because I didn't need you. I've made it without you. I now have you, but I don't know what to expect. So it's legit. And I think that counseling is very important, especially in the case that the child has a father that now wants to be present and legitimately can and will do it. There may be need to be some healing of those attachment
Right.
issues and feelings of rejection
On both parts though, right?
on
Counseling
both
should be on
parts.
both parts because what I don't want to do is re-engage. And I want to talk about guilt because maybe guilt has something to do with it, right? So I'm going to re-engage for guilt, but dad keeps ghosting me, right? As they say, he keeps leaving and coming back and keeps telling me, yes, I'm gonna do this and no, and he doesn't do it. So do I keep because I want this relationship or because maybe I feel guilty that's dad and I have to have this relationship? Do I keep engaging or do I get some counseling, understand that dad, like your young lady, is not capable, right, of having this relationship and protect my peace, set my boundaries, and keep it moving? Is that an option?
Absolutely, and I think you're right. I think that the counseling, if the father is sincere about being there, the counselor might advise about the attachment issues that may exist because the father wasn't there, and the son needs to get some counseling just to help with with the issues of attention, affection, and validation are
Mhm.
things that just being human makes it that we need that. And
Yeah.
if you I don't want to go too far off track, but personality disorders are actually
Tied
um,
to.
yeah, are actually a result developmentally in many cases of people not getting attention, affection, and validation. They need it
Yep.
so badly that they will find these unhealthy, manipulative ways, even crushing other people to get to it. And you know, I might add that personality disorders are made into three clusters.
Yeah.
And the cluster A, B, and C. And there is, in graduate school, we learned it to be mad, sad, and bad, right? And so the mad is like and it's kind of unsophisticated to call it
Right.
this, but it's like the ones that have to do with irrational or people the things that people may say, oh, it's so off
Yeah.
that you may say it seems crazy,
Yep.
to be psychotic or like that. But then the ones that we call bad, which are the narcissistic personality
Yep.
disorder, antisocial personality disorder, these people in many cases simply couldn't find the attention, affection, and validation that they needed and found some kind of distorted way to get it. And we talk about these people like they are just bad people,
And
but
they're not.
yeah, there's really something so
Yeah.
deep underneath that they were looking for. Now, I
Mhm.
wouldn't advise my daughter or son to go seek out, a person with a personality disorder. But
No.
talking about fathers, it's really deep because we need to understand that some of the stuff that we see in the way of mental health is really a direct result of these fractured or absent
Yeah.
relationships.
And and you say that because even, even sometimes the child don't understand even when it's for work, right? Whether dad was a first responder or a surgeon or some kind of job, military or something that took him away, sometimes this can still look the same as, well, where's dad and why am I not enough, right? It's not till they maybe get older to develop an understanding of it, but it doesn't mean that they didn't already develop this personality disorder either because they were looking to fill a void that was for dad, so they're looking for a void, and that's the whole other piece about a young man looking for a dad. They tend to go and get into sometimes mischief and sometimes gangs and sometimes, all these things just so I can feel like I belong somewhere. Right. So that's why I'm saying that dads are so important, but yet I feel like um we downplay it, right? And I know, even my husband, even Eric, I'd be like, "Oh, Father's Day." He was like, "Oh, it's no big deal." Oh, yeah, it is a big deal, right? And I'm like, "Listen, I'll celebrate Aunt's Day. I don't care. Give me a reason." But Father's Day is a big deal, especially to me because again, the father that I had, and we're gonna leave it at that. But
Hmm.
so to celebrate Eric too, I just want to show him that I do appreciate. But sometimes we as women we bash the men so much that it's like they can't even see their worth. The father doesn't see their worth. And that is so heart wrenching to me, right? How can we help men see their worth?
Hmm.
Especially the fathers.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the things that the problems that exist in an endemic way in the Black community, particularly, I think we just need to continue to deal directly with those problems, and that is just to name a few: um, incarceration and criminal justice involvement,
Mhm.
um, unemployment, underemployment, um, educational deficits, and that
Mhm.
includes simply attending schools that don't have a restorative approach to discipline. So,
Mhm.
contributing to the school to prison pipeline, and schools that are under resourced, et cetera.
Yeah.
Those are the things that we need to deal with because I really believe that when boys are valued and taught that they are important in the world, that they grow up to be men who want to put that. I mean, they want to give that to the next generation, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because they are important to our society, right? And as you can see, there's Don, have you ever heard of the book Black Men Single, Dangerous and Obsolete?
Yes, but I haven't had the pleasure of reading it yet.
I had my son read that book because that was
Mm.
powerful. I had him read it at a younger age too because that's what seemed you talked about our community. That's what seems like is happening. They're out here, they're single, they're doing things because they didn't have a role model. Dangerous, they're depicted as dangerous because that's
Absolutely.
all we see on the TV, and then they become an obsolete because either they're, being murdered or they're incarcerated or somewhere else. So, it's like the black man we do, and I agree with you, it's got to start with our boys, right? And that's why I brought the mother impact in there because moms, it's important that we don't inflict that emotional abuse on them that looks something like this. Or your daddy ain't no good, so you ain't gonna be no good. Or I am emotionally bonding to my son because dad is not there.
Mm.
All of this impacts our young men, right? And then they grow up into men, and how can they have healthy relationships? So I think everything that you said is so vital, and we just have to do better. And it almost seems like the last few years things have been rolling backwards and kind of tying our hands a little bit.
Oh,
Um
you're being very, generous there to say it almost seems. I mean, the some of these people who are, in power are simply they literally want to make America, a place of segregation again.
yeah.
They outlawing, diversity, equity, and inclusion
Yep.
programs, affirmative
DEI. I want to
action.
have a whole show on that.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Right. And this is the other problem with that. We don't educate our boys to be better, right? We shouldn't be educating our boys. There's nothing wrong with sports at all, but what about the academics? right? What
Absolutely.
about the academics? And that's what we have to teach our children, how to be part of society, right? We have to value the academics more so than the, let me say this a different way because I was going to say the balls, but the basketball, the football, we got to say.
It's I mean, listen, that's another show off into itself too. Like the underachievement is okay culture that I do think. I mean, I don't want anybody to get upset with me, but I do think that it permeates, some places in Black culture. And when I was a guidance counselor, one of the things that is like that I have PTSD from is students saying things like, um, "Oh, we're going to be mobbing in summer school because there was so many kids that failed classes that summer school is going to be crowded." But instead of looking at that as like something to be concerned about, like, man, we failed so many classes, they're looking at that like, in fact, in our day in New York, I don't know if you remember, Ellison, that night school was like the
Night
place to
school.
be because
Yes.
people were failing
I was never
classes.
there, but yes, it was a place.
Yeah, but people fell in classes and they were like, "Man, we going to night school and we hanging out at night school."
Phyllis was not having it, okay? It would have been me and her foot up in night school.
Right, right.
But
Likewise.
yeah, so I think that's important when we have to teach our young men the value of an education because they can't take that from you, right? But if we don't strive to do more, because a lot of our neighborhoods, schools don't have the same literature as our light skinned counterparts do. So we have to go politically correct. We have to go above and beyond to learn more, right? Encyclopedia, what? They don't even know what that word is. They don't even know what I'm talking about right now. But
Mhm.
you know what I'm saying? But this is where again, if we had the father in the home who had these values and taught these values to their sons, it makes a greater impact. But sometimes the young man takes on the role and a responsibility that dad's not here. I got to take care of mom and my family the best way I can. That's a whole different
Yeah,
way of looking at it. But this is some of the roles that our young adolescent men are forced into to
yeah.
now I got to take care of mom and my siblings, and that's not for them. So that's a whole nother dilemma when our young men take on this responsibility. What can that cause on them?
Well, there's a phenomenon called parentification. When the child becomes a parent. I mean, it could be I had a lot of students who spoke Spanish and English, and their parents only spoke Spanish. So then, when the parent really should be coming up to the school to see about the child and to
Mhm.
give advisement about what they want for their child, the child's actually explaining what the adults are saying and kind of making their own decisions.
Right, right.
The mom, we're going to do this because this is what is good. And so that child is really becoming a parent. In some cases, children didn't even want their parents to come up because either they were embarrassed or
Yeah.
I just don't think that my father is drinking or something else is happening. So I'm going to become my own advisor at school, which in one way it's okay. It's good for the child to be self-sufficient.
Mhm.
But in another way, the child's becoming a parent. And in the 1980s and 90s with the drug epidemic, the crack epidemic in New
Yes.
York, there was a bunch of young men. Is horrible to say, but it's true. That were actually bringing money into their households
By
that
selling the crack. Yeah.
that was actually appreciated by mom and other members of the household because the money wasn't there otherwise. And
Right.
where they might have KRS-One's famous line on the "Love Is Gonna Get You" song. He said, "I did it once, I did it twice." He's talking about drug dealing. Now there's
Yep.
steak with the beans and rice, right?
Yep.
So that was a real phenomenon. So
Yes, it was. Yeah.
parentification of of kids, of boys, of kids in general is real.
Yeah. So we're coming to a close. I want to talk about what does it look like healing from this father's wound, right? The father's wound of being absent, the father's wound of maybe some emotional dysregulation or, mental disorder or, rejection, abandonment. What does it really look like to heal from this? And does it look different if my father's living versus my father being deceased?
So, for the audience, I would say that we have the cortex, the part of the brain that doesn't start developing until early in your life, but it develops throughout your adolescence. And famously, it's stated that it doesn't stop developing for men until we're 25, and for women, 22, 23 years old. But that cortex is the part of the brain that we want to live from generally. The limbic system, or the brain stem, is the part of the brain that really, we're dealing with more survivalistic
Mm-hmm.
things. We're dealing with, just being okay, living or dying, right? And living or dying symbolically means being okay, or not being okay, right? So what we're talking about for counseling is that counseling allows people to refute some of the distorted ideas that are in the head, that where you might really believe that you have to live in a very survivalistic way. You may have narcissistic traits that you have because of that father's wound. And, a good counselor, a therapist could really help you to recognize those behaviors, and show you that there's, help you to see that there's another way
Mm-hmm.
to approach life, and, to deal with the father's wound head on. Because, like any other issues of attention, affection, validation, feelings of not being achieved, and
Mm-hmm.
feelings of rejection, it can be dealt with the right counseling and family support.
Right. Well, thank you, Don. That was good. And you're so right. Again, if I don't know I have distorted thinking, then therapy is definitely it because it can help me, refocus, reframe my whole mindset of those irrational thoughts. Of course, I say you got to have God because that is the most powerful thing that keep us going too. So I want thank you, Don, so much for coming on and giving us some insight about this father son relationship and even tapping into yours. And I think it's really important of what you're doing in the community, and we need more fathers to step up. And there's a lot of different programs out there, but I wanted to roll this one. If anybody wanted to go to the website, it's about fatherhood about .gov. It's programs about fathers out there that needs help, fathers that might have mental health, fathers who might need help getting reacclimated with their children, fathers who may need help with the parent, like the mother won't let me see my child, or whatever the case may be. If you go to this website, there's different kind of programs for you to find out, about your right as a father. So I just wanted to make sure I did scroll that up there because I want people to get educated because our people suffer from the lack of knowledge, right? And if
Absolutely.
I feel like if it's not ratchet, they not tuning in. If we was talking ratchet, we would have thousands of viewers, right? But we're talking about something that's going to help the person and the community as a whole. But you know what? If but one,
Right.
if
Absolutely.
but one, right? So again, Don, thank you so much for coming on Real Talk with Ellison, and we're gonna put you behind the scenes. We'll be right back, okay?
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Ellison.
So thank you guys for tuning in to Real Talk with Ellison. We have been on with my friend, my colleague, Don Sinkfield, who is in the New York area, and he has his own therapy company, therapeutic office, whatever you want to call it. He got it. That's his website right there, scrolling across. Look, we all need some help. You don't have to be in New York. They do self pay. Go on and pull out that debit card. Anyway, so Next week, we are going to have another colleague of mine, a female counselor, on, and we're going to be talking about the daughters and a father's wound. So tune in next week on Real Talk with Ellison at 7 p.m. Don't forget to share this out too, because y'all know somebody who going through some things. All right, y'all be blessed. Thanks for watching. Mwah.